Hey, welcome back to the Midweek Recap. Today I'm here with Jamie and Daniel, and you guys actually started new positions. We announced it this past Sunday. So Daniel is now our discipleship pastor. He's over everything, pretty much high school through adult ministry.
Yep.
And then Jamie has moved into a role where he's really going to be overseeing everything we do with EVC Go, which is church planting, ministry outside of the walls of the church and abroad all over the world.
Yep.
And then also helping out Daniel with adult ministries and life groups and stuff like that. So, Jamie, tell me some of the stuff you're excited about with EVC Go and working with, adult ministry.
Yeah, I think for me, the most exciting part is realizing and just kind of sensing God's calling on your life when there is a change, and being at a church that supports that, being at a church that empowers you through that, and so I am excited about that, and I'm excited about all, everything that is EVC Go. I've always had a passion for missions, and whether that's local or abroad, and so to be able to kind of hone in on that, as well as focus on some areas of our life groups, mainly that lower, the younger groups like the 30s, but really pouring into the life group leaders there, looking to expand that and grow that, and so yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a blast, and just to see kind of where God takes us from here. In terms of EVC Go and life groups is going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you guys have some big plans on how to get life groups involved with what we're doing in EVC Go and some of our ministry partners. And we have new things on the horizon for EVC Go, new places that we're trying to start ministries in.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, if you were here the past couple of weeks, you heard about Cross and Anchor in Detroit and Josh Bowers there. And then this past week with James and Cersei and his wife Callie, who are dear friends of mine, planting Cross and Crown over in Roanoke. And so not only that, but as Bart mentioned, the partnership of a church plant in Harlem, as well as the Pacific Northwest. But then even farther, we are looking at and going to be partnering up with a partner in Senegal, as Bart mentioned as well, working with the Fulani people over there, and also supporting a school who trains and sends out church planners.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we are going all over the board, it seems like. And, I mean, we've not just Honduras, not just Africa, not just Canada, but as some of you know, and as Daniel we'll share here in a little bit, St. Lucia is one that we're going to continue on supporting as well. And so, and then prayerfully, where else, right? Like we know that God has more for us. We just don't know exactly where. So
I think that's pretty exciting too, which, by the way, man, let me just to tell everyone who's listening that it is awesome. I was challenged just by, Jamie, your faithfulness, because not a lot of people really understand like ministry life as a pastor when we feel like callings are transitioning into new areas. There's a lot of unknown that we face. And I just love the fact that, we're at a church here at Eagles View Church that encourages us as pastors just to seek God, what we're called into. And I know that when you made that call for yourself and to answer that call as God was transitioning you, that it was, all right, God, I don't know what's going to happen, but I have faith in you. And I love the fact that we get to click up and help out with, a lot of the adult ministries. And one of the things that I love that you kind of bring to the table with the EVC Go and your passions there is just bringing some of the stuff we do as a church, EVC Go, and getting our life groups involved in that. That's one of the special things about our church is how every aspect of our church, we get involved in so many of these ministries. One of the cool things, you kind of mentioned it earlier about St. Lucia, is that we had a life group with, bring up an opportunity with the Sea of Hope ministry to to say, hey, can this be something that we support for EVC Go? And they took charge. A life group started that. It didn't come from, a lot of our people for EVC Go, you kind of mentioned, church planners that are family related.
Right.
I had my brother-in-law just in town to meet with Pastor Bart about possibly exploring doing church planning in the next couple of years. And so it's not just those connections. It's not just only your pastor's connections. It is, those within our church. And I love the fact that that one life group that's where it started. And then they, we as a church said, hey, we want to support this. And I know there's an opportunity even coming up with you meeting with him soon and stuff. And that's really what we're excited about with kind of coming together and working together with the adult ministries, is bringing that element of, EVC Go into our life groups, and our life groups not only bringing up opportunities and faithfully giving to them, but then also faithfully praying for all this stuff that we do here through EVC Go.
Yeah. So, one of our big goals this year with EVC Go, with life groups, is that every single life group is connected to a church partner or missions organization that we as EVC sponsor.
Yeah.
Whether that's somebody we already currently sponsor as a church plant or missions organization, or somebody that life group, like Sea of Hope, has a connection with already, and then they bring that to the table. And it's not just prayer needs, right? Like we want them connected. We want every life group connected with a church plant and a church partner. And we want them praying for them, but we want them to be kind of that conduit, that is that gap, that bridge for the gap between us and that church partner. Is, hey, when that church needs something, they don't call myself necessarily or Pastor Randy or Pastor Bart. They reach out to that life group. When they need a group to come in and help them with a fall festival, they reach out to that life group, right? And obviously, we're still here, but we want to empower our people, and it kind of goes along with really the reason for this podcast today, and piggybacking off of what Bart said on Sunday is generosity, right? Is being generous, and that's not just with our money, that's with our time, right? That's with our prayer life, and I think that is one great way that our church can be generous, not just with this upcoming EVC Go gift, but every life group saying, hey, we're going to take on a church plant and a church partner, and we are going to be supporting them in all areas.
Yeah. I love the idea of our life groups and just the people in our church getting involved in the ministry that we're doing here. And like, even when you're looking at James Searcy, who's one of our newest church plants, or Josh Bowers in Detroit, like both of those church plants were connected to us by people in our church.
Yep.
That by that connection, it wasn't just Bart going out and looking at a list of church plants. Like there were people in our church that saw the need, and that's so important because we're here most of the time. Like we have our head down doing ministry, getting to know the people in our church. But it's the people in our church that are going out into their everyday lives, into their jobs, into the world, and they're seeing needs. And that the fact that they could see needs and they could bring it to us, but they can also take it to their life group and meet those needs on a very practical level.
Absolutely.
That sometimes like we wouldn't be able to do necessarily because there's only a few of us here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really cool. And I just want to echo something that Daniel said, that, Jamie, a lot of people don't know that we've known each other for almost 7 years now.
We
and
have.
like for as long as I've known you, you've done student ministry, and we knew each other doing camp ministry together. And like, it's been really cool seeing you make that transition. Like when you came to me and said that you were thinking that you were ready to step out of student ministry, I just want to say, like, you've handled that with a lot of humility and poise.
I appreciate it.
And I think it's been a really cool thing to see. And I think, if God ever takes me to a place where I'm going to transition to a different ministry area, I hope that I handle it in the same way.
Appreciate
But Daniel, also with you worked in student ministry for a long time.
Yeah.
And then when you came here, you moved more towards life groups and adult ministry. But now, kind of an unforeseen twist, you're back in student ministry, working with our high schoolers.
Yep.
So, like, what are you excited about? We had the parent meeting on Monday. Like, what are some things you're excited about doing in high school ministry?
Yeah, I think one of the big things I'm most excited about in this role of being the discipleship pastor is leading out in an area that I'm very passionate about. I love adult ministry, and I'm excited to have a great team, Jamie, Steve, and us three kind of being the three-headed monster that kind of takes care of that and takes lead our church in a lot of those areas. And so I'm excited about that. As I shared with Randy, Doc a lot, is like, man, like there's so much work to do in adult ministries. We all know that, and just being able to partner with and click up with Jamie and Steve to make sure we do our role, which is to equip the saints. Like I'm so excited about that, and now just with God calling Jamie into a transition into a different role. Randy came up to me and said, "Hey, there's a need in student ministry, and that can be something that we slide into. One of your add that into the roles that you kind of fill for our church." And and I shared with them, "Listen, I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna seek God about it, and I'm only gonna do it if God calls." And so, God called, and just answering that call of stepping into the high school ministry, and just really kind of thinking about the fact that I was joking with my wife. I'm like, man, I'm 33 and I'm stepping back into student ministry again, and really focusing on that for a season for our church, and along with all the adult stuff, but like back in student ministry, this is crazy. I'm too old to kind of connect with our students, and my wife, she's always awesome and amazing. She looked at me jokingly. She was like, "Well, Jesus was 33 when he started his earthly ministry,
and I was 34 when I got out."
and then she goes, and you know better than most that a lot of scholars already believe that the disciples that Jesus had, they were all teenagers, and so." Welcome back to the ministry, Daniel. So we all kind of chuckled, but I love student ministry. God has kind of showed me whatever it was, whatever role I had. When I was in Delaware, I was, in the role of student pastor vocationally for 7 years. And then God called me out, to be the interim there to help the transition from my lead pastor. I think there's a commonality there. Like I'm the guy that helps with transitions, I guess. And so then coming here as a life groups pastor, and now into this discipleship pastor that encompasses a lot of high school to adult, just the fact that God has shown, and I love kind of like what Jamie said too, is, and he echoed it in that parent meeting, was that we love students. Like, even if you're a student, you're a student pastor, you'll always have a love for students, that God just calls you to love students in a different way, in a different role. And so we're excited about where student ministry is headed. It was a special time this past Monday in that parent meeting. We got to send off and honor Jamie as our first full-time student pastor, and he's going into adult ministries, helping us there in EVC Go, and then kind of celebrating the fact that now the baton has been passed, and we're going forward as a high school ministry, and it's just awesome. I think it speaks volumes too that all 8 of the adult leaders that were with Jamie, first thing when we announced the transition, we made sure we met with them, and all 8 decided that, they've said, no, we're called, and we're excited about the direction the student ministry is going and the high school ministry is going. But I think that really kind of just speaks to the fact that, where God calls, you just answer, and he's the one that supplies everything. He supplies every single need that we have, and that just speaks to kind of what we're talking about. We are called to be generous because of God's great generosity. I mean, think about it. Like, we were bankrupt with sin, and the Bible is very clear that when we come to a relationship with Christ, like, what happened was that he credited to our bankrupt account Christ and his righteousness. And I was like, man. And so when you think about the generosity of our Savior, generosity of God, it calls us to respond in generosity. And I love one of the things that we say here at EVC often, over and over. Bart says it almost every single time I'm talking with him or we're talking about stuff with EVC Go. He says it all the time that he wants us as EVC to be known as one of the most generous churches of our generation. And let me tell you, I've been around in ministry for not as long as Bar and Randy, for a little over a decade now. And I can honestly say, man, this is one of the most generous churches that I know of today. And I'm excited to be a part of that, excited to just click up and move forward. And as kind of Bart said, call the play and let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Bart's message this week was really good. And it's really seemed like this theme of generosity has come up a lot in this sermon series where we've been talking about the persecuted church, and even in the book of Acts, the early church, that one thing we know about them for sure, because it talks about it multiple times, is that they were a generous church, that they gave of themselves to meet the needs of the people in their community. And that's not easy. And when Bart talks about it, it's important. When Bart talks about that, we want to be one of the most generous churches of our generation. He's not just talking about it on an organizational level.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just about how much budget we put in certain areas. It's talking about the individual. Let's talk about Sidney McKay. He wants Sidney McKay to be one of the most generous believers of her generation. He's talking about Jamie Pippen. I want Jamie Pippen to be one of the most generous believers of his generation. That's his heart for our church as a body of believers, that we commit to generosity in our everyday lives and that we give of ourselves. But I think that's a really cool vision for where we're going to go in the future, and it aligns with what we see in the book of Acts and what they did. I want to ask you guys that in the years that you guys have done ministry, or in your marriages, what are some times that you've seen where generosity make an impact in lives?
I mean, there's been numerous, and it's not that typical, like, oh, somebody was generous enough to my family and they paid our bills for 8 months, right? Like nothing like that. But as many of you know, like we took students to Baltimore this past summer. Would have gone the year before, but a little thing called COVID, and that wasn't the first time, right? Like I've taken multiple trips there, and there was this one specific trip that we were on, and these students, and it wasn't a large group, it was probably 10 students maybe, and a couple of adults, and we were kind of sitting in the gym and kind of like joking around, and we're talking students who have already paid like probably close to $1,000 each to go on this trip. And you know, they've raised support, they've done this, and so they come on this trip, and they've been working hard all week, doing sports camps for kids and cleaning up and painting and doing all kinds of stuff at the place that we were serving. And we were all kind of sitting around, and it started out as a joke, which kind of is weird when telling the story. But Brian Zimmerman, the lead pastor of Streetlight Christian Fellowship in Baltimore, said, "Hey, if I make this basketball shot, y'all owe me y'all owe me $400 or something like that." And he shot like 3 times and missed it, right? And so then I looked at him, and I had a football in my hand, and I said, "Hey, if I make this football from half court into the goal, y'all owe Brian and Streetlight $500. I'm like, "Okay." Well, I just step up and I throw it. Boom. Nothing but net. And so I'm thinking like, okay.
Perfect moment.
Yeah. It was like Sports Center top 10 kind of stuff, you know? And I remember sitting in that gym, and it was almost like it looked kind of, what was going on kind of looked illegal, because next thing you know, like money just starts hitting the floor. And I'm like, whoa. Like they're actually doing this. Like, honestly, like Brian was joking. And honestly, I was joking too. I mean, we're talking teenagers on this trip, right? And so money starts coming. And finally I said, "Okay, guys, whatever y'all give, our student ministry will double it. And we'll give it to Brian. And we'll give it to the church." And so they all put money in. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be like $100, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I start counting it up, and it comes out to be like $800.
Oh, shoot.
And I'm like, you mean tell me these poor teenagers, like, spending money for this trip, right, just shelled out $800. And so the cool part, though, was because of their generosity, there was a house that was on the property of the church. They were fixing for a mission house, and they would also bring homeless people in to give them hot meals and showers and change of clothes and stuff like that. And so with that money, the cool part was that Brian the next day was able to take that money and go buy brand new furniture for that house for the people of Baltimore to come in and to hang out and just had a nice comfortable place to sit within that house. And so like it was cool watching the generosity of teenagers, right? Be able to provide something on top of what they were already there doing that week. And so it was, like I said, it started out as kind of a joke that I happened to make a shot, and next thing you know, they're just being generous with the money that they had, which is pretty cool.
I think too, generosity extends further than just money. Because I think we all can kind of, as people, can kind of point to moments in our lives where people have been really generous with money. I remember a moment where my wife and I, we both got married young, early 20s, and both of us don't have a job right now, and for the circumstances, we weren't able to work at that moment when we first got married. We were living on savings, and the savings was enough to take us from August to the end of October to pay all of our bills. And I was in seminary and I was finishing up school, and we were waiting for her to be able to get back to work and stuff with her work visa coming in. And we were living on a prayer, like Bon Jovi's song. We come in at the end of October, we pay all the bills, and we come to the beginning of October, all the bills are paid, got enough money to buy a little bit of groceries, and then our bank account was like $2.72. That's it. And one of the camps that I had always spoken at, when I was going around I speak for student ministry camps all the time, and it was one that I did for those that were just in the foster care system, and so it was a big camp week where we kind of just all donated our time, and we never got paid. And so I came in, I had been doing this camp for like 3 years already, and this was my fourth year, and so I did it. Fourth year, got done, never expected a paycheck, and these kids gave money. They found out, these foster care kids found out that I was doing this for free, and gave money in, and the director was like, no, like, he's doing this for free. And they kept on insisting, so they sent me a check for like $1,000 in the beginning of October, and it was just enough to pay for rent, food, and stuff in November. My wife gets back to work and stuff like that. And it's like, generosity is, it just makes a huge impact on people, on communities. I think about the generosity that's not typically, when you think of it, it's typically money. But even my wife, my lovely bride, our lovely brides, my lovely bride, she was going to school, and bookends of her going to get her master's in nursing, she had David, my middle son, and then Danny, my youngest. And like in a 2-year gap, and she finished school and stuff like that. And she understood that, hey, she needed to focus on these areas of school and family. So she had to take a step back, and a lot of ministry stuff. She's my helper, my partner, always helping me do ministry. But for those 2 years, she had to take a step back. And I'm just sitting there looking at her, and I remember that season just telling her, man, you were just so generous with your time and service to our family, because it allowed me to do the work of the ministry, to do the equipping that I'm called to do. And so generosity is more than just just money. I think a lot of times we just think about money, but it's our time, it's all the resources that we've been given by God, it's our giftings. Are we generous with that?
Yeah, that's really good. I really love this quote that Bart said. It says, as God's grace grips our hearts, the grip on our possessions is loosened. I think we really live in a culture that is so materialistic that every year one of these things come out, a new iPhone, and we just have to have it. And it's like, man, it's only like $25 a month. It's only $25 a month, and I get to upgrade, I get to trade it in, it'll be fine. Like, but there's so many things like that where like our possessions own us. And they really do have a grip on our lives. But what would it look like if we as a church continued to commit to letting go of some of that stuff and really investing in the kingdom and doing work.
I think it like starts off with many of us having the wrong mindset, and there are times where I slip into it often. It's like I look at it and I was like, this is mine. This is my money. This is my, like, I worked hard for this. This is my, forgetting the fact that everything I have in my life has been provided by God's hand. And so, and he has called me at all times to steward what he's given to me well. I steward that into my family, steward that into to other people. I steward that into giving to the church, giving to the EVC Go gift here shortly and stuff. Like, I think, and there's moments, even to this day, like I slip into that, like this selfishness of these are my things. But man, like I kind of mentioned earlier, like you look at the generosity of God, you can't help but respond in generosity. We were bankrupt.
Yeah.
And now we are co-heirs with Christ. His righteousness has been accredited to our account. We are deemed to be part of an amazing family, to be sons and daughters of the Most High. And so I think it's a realization of making sure we have the right mindset. And when we find ourselves slipping into that, take a step back and allow the Holy Spirit to do the work, that it needs to do in your life.
Yeah, and I think some of that is it starts early, that we're teaching our kids what it looks like to be generous, and that everything we own belongs to the Lord. Like it's all God's, and that we're supposed to operate with open hands towards. I know me and Danielle have talked about, like, the way me and Kayla do it with our kids is mine is a bad word in our house. That if Judah comes to me and starts fighting with his brother, like, that's mine toy, that's mine. Like, no, it's not. It's God's and it's ours. That all this belongs to all of us, and it belongs to God, and we're going to operate with open hands in that. And my hope is that one day, like, Judah's going to go into life, he's going to be operating in his everyday life, and it's not going to be hard for him to give up things that would be considered his, that things that he earned, for the betterment of people around him. That because there are things like it's his birthday and he does get a toy, and the thing is, like, yeah, you got a toy. We got that for your birthday, and like, but sometimes, like, because we love our brother, because we love our little brother, and we know it'll make him happy. He's like, we're gonna give ourselves to do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I really do think, I know, and Dustin and Kendra do a really good job of trying to teach this to the kids and our kids in preschool ministry. Even when it comes to things like EVC Go. Yeah. The importance of everybody in the church, giving of themselves to go towards a bigger mission, a bigger goal. And like Daniel said, we have EVC Go coming up.
We do. It's coming up this weekend. And I think, obviously EVC Go is a big focus monetarily, right? 100% of that offering that we collect on Sunday, whether given online or in person, goes outside of this church, goes to our church planters, partners, goes towards, building a school, another school building in Honduras, to potentially, of supplying Bibles to the people in Senegal, and the language that they need. And so, but that is all awesome. But I think, kind of going back to what you guys were just saying, is generosity is not just, as you said, monetarily speaking, but it should be the way we live our life, right? And when I think about that, I go back to a friend of mine that both of y'all probably know, and I say friend because, I mean, we don't talk regularly, but we know each other. We have a relationship. And Shane Pruitt, who many of you listening probably have heard of, but I remember that moment that they got this was like 2 or 3 years ago, that they got a phone call that said, "Hey, we have a baby that needs to be adopted." And generosity for them was, when do we need to be there? and they left, and within like 10 hours, they added another human being to their family, and the kids at the time didn't even know it. And like the video went viral and everything like that. But when I think of generosity, yes, I think of an offering, right? I think of giving and supporting, but I also think of the things that we do have, right? You may say, well, I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money, but you have just as much time as the person next to you. And how are we being good stewards of that time, right?
Yeah.
And for some of you, hey, your gift to EVC Go is maybe just a little bit of money this year, but your biggest gift to EVC Go is saying, I'm going to go to Honduras. I am going to go and I am going to help in whatever way is necessary, whether you can build stuff, whether you can love on kids, but like that's how you're going to give to EVC Go.
Yeah, or like you're going to take it upon yourself to get your life group to go and help one of our local ministry partners.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Community. Like, I think it goes back to that it really is important that, again, it's not just money.
No.
But it's that we're taking everything that God has given us, our time, our resources, our money, and we're giving it back to him, and we're surrendering all of that. And really, that generosity begins with contentment. If you're not content with the things that you have in this life, with the amount of time that you have, the amount of money that you have, the amount of possessions that you have, you are not going to be generous.
No.
Generosity is contentment in practice. It's saying, I know that I have enough, and God has been gracious to me and has been generous to me, and because of that, I'm content, and I'm going to do that to somebody else. That I'm going to give of myself to somebody else.
It's kind of piggyback off what you said, Will. It's that idea of, are you content in King Jesus? Because I hate to say the Sunday school answer, but that's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's like everything goes back to, like, are you good with that? If he's all you had, is that enough? Is that enough? And we talking about earlier that we want to be known as one of the most generous churches of our generation. Like, Scripture shows it. Like, the church in Scripture, we're very generous. I think about the Macedonian church. In 2 Corinthians, I actually pulled it up. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2. The Macedonian church, they faced so much affliction. They were poor. They had just went through so much, stripped all their natural resources in the Macedonian area. Rome did that, and this is what Paul writes about their example, that for in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. That comes from having contentment in King Jesus, that he is more than enough. And one of the things I learned in my time up in Delaware from one of the elders there, anytime we got to talking about giving and stuff, he had this statement that he would always say, and it has always left an impression on me. It's not equal giving, but it's equal sacrifice. Like, that we are all called to equally sacrifice. Now, what I'm called to sacrifice is going to look a lot differently than, what I'm called to give is going to look a lot differently than some guy that's out there with $10 million, and God, if you want to give me $10 million, okay. I'm not against that. But at the end of the day, we're called to equally sacrifice. And so it's not the same amount but we're equally sacrificing for our God. And that comes from a heart that is in content with King Jesus, that he's all that we really ever need. And he's more than enough.
Yeah. And I'd say not only, right, like our hearts can be content, but I find this in myself sometimes, right, like we've been in a spot where, hey, that paycheck to paycheck was a real deal.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
I hear
hey,
that.
it was, hey, we're gonna stretch this thing of lunch meat farther than probably just about any family in America can stretch it, and we're gonna make it work, right? And so, like, in my heart, I was content, and in my mind, I was like, God, I need more, right? I need this, I need that. And so I think we need to be at that point, like Daniel said, with a content heart but open hands.
Mm-hmm.
That we can't, as Christians, be the Christians that we're called to be with closed hands. And I love what Bart said. He says, what our culture is craving is not perfect Christians. It's humble and authentic ones. And it's really hard to be humble and authentic when your heart's not content and your hands are closed. That you have to live the life that you're called to live. My life is going to look different than yours will and yours Daniel's. But one thing that should be the same is our contentment in Christ and the posture of our hands.
Like I remember being a young kid, and I got my very first paycheck, and my dad instilled this in me at a very young age, is to understand that, man, like I said earlier, everything that's been given to you, Daniel, has been God. That's God's. He gave it to you to steward. And because I remember I made the mistake of telling my dad, I'm like, well, that's mine. Like, why does God, talking about giving, he's like, why does God want my money? And my dad was like, no, that's God's. He just called you to steward it. And oh, by the way, let me kind of go ahead and tell you, like, God doesn't need your money, but God wants to use what you give for his ministry. And so for some people, man, they have that question of like, well, like why is it so important? Like, God can use that. Like that's like God wants to use the resources of the church. And the church I'm talking about, not these four walls, but of God's people. The resources that he's given you, he wants to use that to spread the kingdom even further. So I think it helps when we just have kind of speaking to what you were getting at. Bart said that we should not look to be a reservoir, but a conduit of his generosity. We've experienced it, so we need to be that conduit to a world, especially in America, so materialistic, that needs to see people that's like, man, we're just generous. We love generously. We give generously, time, resources. We just, because we see you and we see the greatest need that you have, and that's God.
Yeah. I want to end with this, Daniel, because I've heard you teach this a couple different times since I've been here. And I think it really applies to kind of this season that we're in. And when Bart talks about generosity and, we have the Go Gift coming up. I want you to just walk us through the giving ladder, the different rungs of that.
Yeah. So it's not a new, fresh idea. It's a book that was written way back in the 80s and 90s. When I was reading it, I was challenged to read it when I was in seminary, and I was like, okay, how do we repurpose this for our day and age? And so. And that one had like 15 rungs. I'm like, nah, let's not do that. So there's 3 rungs. And anytime any person I sit with and I disciple with them, I'm sitting with a young family, couple, a husband and wife that wants a family. And I was kind of just sharing this topic on giving just recently with them, is to challenge them is like, where do you fall in this rung? Like, you're a believer, you have experienced the rich generosity of King Jesus by coming to faith in him, and now like our response is like, to give generously back. And so maybe God is calling you've never given at all into the kingdom of God. And so that first rung is just 3 rungs ladder. That first rung is God's calling you to be a first-time giver, to step up and give for the first time. And maybe you've given already for the first time, and you've done that, and you're kind of occasional and stuff like that. You give at different moments and stuff. When we do the angel tree, you choose to give then, and every once in a while, a few times out of the year, you give to giving and stuff. But God is calling you to be stepping into this second rung, which is an intentional giver. An intentional giver, they're consistent. It carries that assumption that you're consistent, but then not only that, like you think through, you pray through, like, man, this is an opportunity. Like, God, you're calling me to do this. And that's what we're kind of calling a lot of people do with this EVC Go, is to intentionally seek God. Like, what are you calling me to give? And then the last rung, and this was kind of what hitting back with what Bart said. We've said it over and over again. We want to be known as one of the most generous churches of our generation. And so being that generous giver, being that extravagant giver and stuff, and that looks like so many different ways. I love my wife is an extravagant giver. My wife is one of the most generous people I have ever met in my life. Like when she was working, she had a big girl job as an RN, and she, like her family, I mean, they were missionaries, and I mean, like some of the things that the home church and the persecuted church experience, like that's where like similar situations that she lived in and stuff. The size of your kitchen was probably the size of her house that she lived in. She's one of the most generous people that I've ever met in my life. And when I was first dating her, she was paying for, and she would probably get upset for me sharing this, but I love my wife and I love her generosity. She challenges me in this, the extravagant and generous giver, that last rung, where like God had just called her to pay for her sister's school. And in that, like while we've been married, like God has challenged, like she has come up to me and challenged me at times in our giving to be like, I have a cousin in the Philippines that's called into ministry that has your exact story, Daniel, but he doesn't think God can provide for him in ministry, which is my story too. And she goes, we're going to give to that. She didn't give me an option. She was like, we're doing that and stuff. I mean, like these people that it's just second nature to them because they have been so consumed by their relationship with God that they can't help but reflect that in their life. And so, where are you in that, in your giving? And I want to challenge those, as you get to EVC Go. If you've never given before, this is a great opportunity to step up onto that giving ladder and being a first-time giver. If you have already given before and like it's sporadic at times, like God is calling you to step up and to be intentional, not just consistent, but intentional, to really seek, to really pray over what you give. And then lastly, to be that extravagant, to be that generous giver, to almost every time something comes up. Like we have some people in our church that are that way. Like every single time there is an opportunity, they just step up, and they don't want any notoriety. They don't want any to be named. Actually, many times there's people that just give, without anonymous, like just give anonymously and stuff. It's consistent and anonymous, and that's they don't want any of the notoriety or the acclaim that comes with it. All they want is so that the gospel to be spread. And so for those, as the EVC gift comes on this upcoming Sunday, would you just, I just want to challenge you. We're in the rung in this giving ladder. Is God calling you to take that next step into?
Yeah, I think a lot of our church, because we do have like we've seen year over year that our people are generous, that even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we had a record year in giving. And I think we do have a lot of people that are giving intentionally at EVC. And I know we're thankful for that we're able to do ministry because of that. And the EVC Go gift is a really good opportunity for you to take that next step up, to be a generous giver, an extravagant giver, to give outside of, the normal first fruit of the tithe that you give every week or every month, that you're going to step out and say, God, what would you have me do above and beyond what is already yours? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, like we've all said multiple times, we have our EVC Go Gift collection happening this Sunday, and this weekend, starting on Saturday through Tuesday, we have our persecuted church experience again. If you guys missed it last time, you don't have to miss out. You can come back out and see it again. You can bring your friends, your family. We would love to see you there this Saturday through Tuesday. You can learn more at eaglesview.church/events. It's been great talking to you guys today.
Yeah, man. Enjoyed it.